Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. Well, it's the 4-year anniversary of when the WHO first declared COVID-19 a pandemic. It's actually also the 13th anniversary of the Fukushima disaster in Japan. March 11th has become a crisis awareness day, if you will, right? We really should have some kind of dedication to being prepared for crises. But I can't believe it's been 4 years, because I still vividly remember the beginning of that. At the beginning of March, we all thought it was a very localized problem. In Kirkland, 2 people had died from COVID-19, and there was a small outbreak at this nursing home. And so nobody really thought much about it, except for the fact that there was a lot of precautions over in Seattle. And I actually took a very quick trip to not Missoula, Kalispell, Montana, to kind of get away from that all. And what was really interesting was, on my way to Kalispell, I passed through a toll road, but there was no toll takers because of the pandemic, and I worried that I was getting a ticket or something. And I called the people at the Washington Department of Transportation. I emailed them. I never heard back from them, so I never paid that toll, whatever it was. So that's how confusing everything was. And I had a good time in Kalispell, and I came back actually on March 11th, and I was listening to the radio, and all of a sudden on the radio it announced that the WHO had officially said that it is okay to refuse to shake hands with somebody. And that was a good feeling, because I've never been a very social person. I have a lot of anxiety, and to be able to back away when somebody comes to me, that was kind of fun at the beginning. Obviously, I've since adjusted to it, and when I got back, everything was a disaster. You know, one of my resolutions in 2020 was to normalize my relationship with food, in large part because oftentimes I would get the weirdest cravings at the most inopportune times, right? In the middle of a meeting, or at a first date, and all of a sudden I'm intruded by thoughts of wanting something. Or, you know, one time my girlfriend was over at my apartment. I went out at 2 in the morning to go get something that I was craving, and she thought I had lost my mind. She was worried about my safety, and those kind of things. Well, when I got home on March 11th, it might have been March 12th, 2020, and I went to the store, none of my favorite foods were available, toilet paper wasn't available, and I remember thinking, you know, this is something that I have to practice, so I wasn't too upset about that. My mom had called me. She wanted to overnight me some toilet paper and some other supplies. She was worried about me. My mom sometimes underestimates my ability to take care of myself. Actually, she was also worried for me because previously I had been living in my car. She wasn't sure if I had moved into a place or something like that. And she overheard me asking an employee at the grocery store when they were getting these food items that I was wanting. And my mom said, you know, don't worry about it. I can overnight you that stuff. I thought about it. My mom has type 2 diabetes. I didn't want her to be running out to the grocery store and to the post office. And so I told my mom not to worry about it. And in the same breath, I realized how stupid I was looking for these foods. The employee at the grocery store probably didn't want to hear me talk about what I was wanting to eat, because there was so much panic and confusion going on. And after I had gone home that day, I was like, gee, this is freedom. I never have to deal with tricky social situations anymore. I got 2 weeks to myself. Well, I had 2 weeks to myself. I decided to write an AI for the game of backgammon. It was a tough challenge for me at the time, and I nicknamed the game Corona Gammon. I was going to spend 2 weeks working on it. Obviously, 2 weeks became 4 weeks, which became the rest of the year, and eventually I wrote the #1 AI for the game of backgammon at the 2021 Computer Olympiad, so that was great. At the end of 2020, I moved to Wallace, Idaho, and it's a mining town. and made a lot of connections there. It's a small town, everybody knows everybody kind of situation. Even to this day, when I visit Wallace, I still have a lot of connections there. You definitely don't get that kind of feeling here in Phoenix. The only downside is I can only imagine what happens in Wallace if you end up in a relationship and there's a dramatic breakup, right? That's why I really resisted getting to know anybody too intimately, because it could really ruin the dynamics of everything. Here in Phoenix, you break up and it's like it never happened, right? It's big, right? Over in Seattle, forget about it. A breakup is like a drop in an ocean, right? So very different dynamics. And then I spent some time in Missoula, Montana, and took a lot of long distance walks along the trails in Missoula. And then I moved to Phoenix first in July of 2021, where I got my skin really tan. You guys may have remembered that. And eventually I discovered, the reason I discovered bismuth and making crystals out of it, I was tutoring a student in AP chemistry, and he had brought in this periodic table that had these little diagrams showing, among other things, how rare the elements are, when they were discovered, a chart of infographics, if you will. And I discovered that bismuth is almost as rare as gold, but much cheaper. And I was like, gee, I got to buy at least 10 pounds of bismuth just to sit on it. So I went home that night and I ordered a 10-pound bismuth bar. And at the tutoring center where I was working at, I often didn't get to stretch a lot, didn't get a whole lot of exercise. So I brought the 10-pound bismuth bar to the office just to lift weights. And I showed my student, that element we were talking about, how rare it is and how cheap it is. Look what I bought. And so that was good. It got the student engaged in what he was studying and all that. And eventually I discovered I could make crystals, make castings out of it, and the rest is history, I guess. Now I've expanded to include other metals as well, including anodizing of tantalum, zinc, and pewter, among other metal alloys. And now I would have been very content with life by myself, but I was watching the Super Bowl last month, and I got really jealous because Travis Kelce obviously had his girlfriend cheering him up, and oftentimes I don't have very many people cheering me on when I'm making the art or at the Computer Olympiad, and that's why I've been returning to the dating scene with a vengeance these days, and sometimes I get myself a little bit too desperate, and it really shows. So I'm going to have to think hard about what to do. At the same time, I'm also following Kelly Clarkson and her quote-unquote second marriage, right? I really do think history will record that she had a second marriage after what happened with her ex-husband. She doesn't even like to use her real name anymore because of that, right? So 4 years, I suppose. Wow, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? This is the Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum.